and said, I got a Christmas gift for you. And he always would give away these like, expensive vehicles, people don't know. I'm sure you heard about this. He would buy 25, 30 Range Rovers at a time. He would order, 20, 30 pickups to give away as gifts, right? And I'm thinking, wow, he's gonna give me a gift. Like, he was always generous. And he said, I got 1,800 kilos right there. Send for him. I was like, boss, no, I can't. I can't. It's Christmas time. It's like right before the holidays. I said, I don't have, the funds. He said, I'm not asking you for the funds. I'm gonna, lend them to you.
Run you 1,800 kilos. Yeah.
And I'm gonna front you the kilos. But in Mexico, like I said, there's no consignment. And I said, sir, I can't take them.
Okay, there's the argument for everybody say, oh, no, but he owed this and they owed that. And he just said clear as day, there's no consignment in Mexico. COD, cash on delivery. Okay? That's why when he was on the phone with Chapo and he told him, I need this work, and you were giving it me at this, can I get it at this? And he said, yeah, all right, buddy, can pick up the money where? Chicago? Okay, good. All right, so get out of the comments. You know who comments in the comments? Besides the great people that comment in the comments, but it be people that don't even watch the show and they talk about things that we've already debunked and covered. Period. But he just said there's no consignment in Mexico, so they weren't in the business of owing nobody nothing. Chucky said that's why they got jacked so much, because they weren't looked at as a threat. Here's the thing, but they could have been a threat, right? If they would have started putting bags down on somebody. But they had so much bread that they didn't have to look like a threat. They could just take that L and get up with you later.
I'm telling them in Spanish, le voy a quedar mal. I'm gonna end up, not keeping up when you want to get paid because it wasn't like planned. And he had me on speaker and he said, and that's why I'm calling you. He said, because anyone else would have said, where do I pick them up?
And I understand where they're coming from. You got to understand, in the hood, there's different kind of dudes. There's the dude that's going to think and the dude that just do things. He's just going to do. He wild. He erratic. Everybody worships him. Oh, he's so gangster. But then there's the dude that says, no, let's use some logic and common sense here. This is going to lead me in the red. Bye, 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 bye. That kind of character is why they brought him that work. And threw it at him. Ian said the Twins could have had their own army if they wanted to. Absolutely. They had the money for it. The only other option that they had, other than what they did and running, was to turn around and face everybody, wipe them all out. Like, that was the other option. That was the third option. You tell me if there's another one.
Are saying you don't want to do it because you don't want to, leave a bad taste in my mouth. And that's why I'm calling you. Send for him. You pay me when you're ready.
Now, okay, this is on the Mexico side. On the US, on the Chicago side, I mean, you're running this massive distribution hub in Chicago. So all the gangs in Chicago are buying from you. People are coming from all over the East Coast. Did you have to, I mean, how was that trying to run an operation like that? Did you have to end up using violence to keep things running there? Did you just how do you manage to keep everything?
Again, I wondered if they needed to use violence to run their organization here in Chicago. They didn't. They said themselves, we bought beef. You got a problem with my homeboy? Cool, we pay that off. Calm that shit down. Otherwise, nobody's going to eat. It's easy to calm shit down like that.
The East Coast. Did you have to, I mean, how was that trying to run an operation like that? Did you have to end up using violence to keep things running there? Did you just how do you manage to keep everything such a big operation?
To manage, I mean, the operation was, when you go back and look at it, at the scale and the consistency of the operation, we were trafficking anywhere from 2,500 to 3,500 kilos a month, traffic, to over a dozen cities in the US and Canada. Being on the business side, I feel like not only were we able to pick and choose the right people to deal with, we took losses, but, for the most part, I'd rather take that loss than actually, resort to violence. That's how we actually handle our business. What we did was that we made it so that if anyone thought twice about robbing us or did rob us or, try to take advantage of us, they had nowhere else to go but hopefully retire, because they were not gonna be able to sell drugs anymore, because we are the ones that kind of controlled, the drug trade, basically. So it was one of those situations where, just because of the business and the way we ran it, it's like there's nowhere you could actually turn to, right? Without, you're not going to be able to take a load of drugs from us or try to compete with us, because there's no competition, basically. I feel like we had a monopoly when it came to the cities we were in, because we always had the best prices and we always had the best quality, because we had those relationships. And it took quite a few relationships, as you just heard, of all the people that were kind of in our life some way, somehow, to actually keep that going. As far as our time in, at that particular time, in the organization, we were unmatched. There's no one else that could actually, and I say this all the time, to people in the classes, that being successful at both ends of, being in the United States and in Mexico is unique because, this might sound, cocky but Chapo or Mayo or Arturo couldn't do what we did in the United States.
And that's a
But yeah,
fact.
I could do what they did in Mexico. If that makes, any sense.
The American.
But yeah, I could do what they did in Mexico. But
they couldn't do what the Twins did here. Language gap, racial gap, all of those things. And Jay believes they could have done what Mayo and Chapo did over there. I don't know. I don't know how that works, you being from this side. But you pay for the right size army, I'm sure.
Chapo or Mayo or Arturo couldn't do what we did in the United States. But yeah, I could do what they did in Mexico. If that makes, any sense.
The American side, that's the side which hasn't really been cut. A lot of journalists in Mexico complain, we never hear about how it's working on the American side. And that's the big complaint from journalists down here that hasn't really been told, although now we're kind of hearing it with, your story and some others. Now, I covered, some of your story back in the time in my first book, and, maybe I got some things right or wrong there. But my understanding was there was this war happened between Beltran Leyva and Chapo, and that started to kind of put pressure on your side because they were fighting over who you're working for. Is that correct? Or how did that, when that war exploded in Sinaloa, and I was covering that around the time in Culiacan back in those days, what did that feel like for you when that was happening?
So now here comes for the tricky part.
Yeah.
As I told this recently, I told this to Congress. I feel like if I ever had an issue with anything that was portrayed was on the government side, was that they took something that my brother and I did voluntarily and they shaped it into what sounded, whatever they were, wanted to promote, was that we were giving ultimatums and we were threatened, by the two most violent drug cartels, the most powerful drug cartels, I want to say, in the world at that time, which we were. Again, me being in that world since I was 7, I try to explain to this. Being threatened by drug cartels or members of drug cartels was a part of my everyday life. We were under the gun each and every day.
All right, there's your answer to why they're not worried about when we sit around and we say, oh, they slipping. This is where that comes from.
And you covered enough of these stories. We were under the gun each and every day.
Each and every day.
And you covered enough of these stories, knowing that you understand where I'm coming from. What always kept my brother and I alive, I think, was instinct. We had already, our family had suffered tremendously by that time. And, my kids were getting older and I didn't want my kids to grow up like the way I grew up. And, it was coming to a point where I could see the line being, drawn in the sand. That's what people like to say, that, either I was gonna, it was gonna come to, a point of no return for us, that we're not gonna be able to continue to be who we were as individuals and have that, what we thought was moral compass, right, of not crossing the line, that it was gonna get to a point where it was gonna, we're not gonna have a choice. And that didn't sit well with us. I felt like, my kids were, getting older, and I was seeing my kids being around certain environments that I didn't feel comfortable with. And it was only going to continue, escalate, especially with, what I seen was coming. And I think that for the most part, my brother and I, and it's hard, it's cognitive dissonance that, we thought we were good people. To us, it was a business. And it took, marrying my wife, who, my brother's wife are both daughters of law enforcement, who, it's hard where it's like, they'd be like, no, that, like, it doesn't matter. You're still not doing the right thing. And them wanting more for us for sure had an impact. And I had one of those moments where I would be like, okay, well, what's, I think every drug trafficker gets to a point where it's like, I wish there's a way. And I remember I would pray on that all the time. And, I say this, that I would be like, how? There's no way. And, I feel like I had a spiritual epiphany one day where I woke up with this idea of saying I could cooperate. It wasn't an easy thing to do. I felt like it was going to be the only way I could, like.
I guess it comes down to what I said at the end of Cartel Wives. At the end of the day, it was all about family. Period. Point blank. Miss me with the change, it was family. Because he just said clear as day. They always say we were in the middle of a cartel war and our families were threatened, right? Yes, that happened. But we were always under threat from the cartel anyway. So that's not the biggest factor. What it seems like he's saying is the biggest factor was seeing his children in the situations that they were in, wanting something different for them, and it being about family at the end of the day. That family, their family, period. That trumped the threats. The threats were an everyday thing.
Rid myself of even family members, right? This was all the life we all knew, and I wanted to do something good for my family. And my brother and I, we talked it out, and you know, it was a risk that we were taking, a gamble. You covered those stories back then. It was a war of, you know, coming, and we were going to risk our life to cooperate against these, you know, powerful drug trafficking organization cartels, right? In the likes of Mayo Zambada and Chapo Guzman and Arturo Leyva, and risk our life to try just for the benefit of hopefully getting some credit, you know, for our cooperation. And I think that gets overlooked. I mean, everyone who's, you know, intelligent enough will say, well, you cooperated from March of 2008 to, you know, November 30th of 2008 against drug cartels.
Yeah.
While I was in Mexico.
Wow.
While,
In Mexico,
wow.
yeah. So
Well, then the war started, you know, officially probably by April. And, you know, those threats came.
Let's talk about the entertainment value in it. Bro, that 9 months, like the show, that could be 24. It's an action film right there. All the sneaking around that they had to do and trying to get on the phone and the manipulating and moving this and that. The TV show, movies, whatever they tell themselves.
Well, then the war started, you know, officially probably by April. And, you know, those threats came, you know, once the war started, you know, it probably progressed. But I was already cooperating. The government for sure knew that we were threatened, but we were working undercover. And I think that the fact that I risked my life to do the right thing gets.
So he's basically saying that he saw the writing on the wall, and before they were threatened fully, that he was already on some, we're getting out of here, or we're not going to get out of here.
And I think that the fact that I risked my life to do the right thing gets overlooked. And that's the only thing I won't ever give up. You know, that thank God my brother and I survived. And, you know, if it was for a selfish reason, or for whatever reason, I know I'm never going to be able to undo those wrongs, but we did it. That's the difference.
You know, you did time in federal prison. Was it in federal prison you did time? And was it like, what was it like doing time? That was after you'd cooperated, and so you were still, were you in danger there? Did you have to be like segregated?
So, you know, I turned myself at the end of November 2008. It took several years for me to actually get my prison sentence. You know, I got sentenced in January of 2015 to 14 years in prison, which I had to serve exactly 12 years for. I spent in those 12 years, I spent almost 3 years segregated, which is probably the most horrible thing you had to go through as a human being. I think, especially for me, who have a twin brother, who, you know, you're separated, you know, alone in a 24-hour a day lockdown, similar to what Chapo's going through today. Yeah, prison, you know, it was a long time. I had plenty of time to think about what was going to be the next chapter in my life. There's plenty of times where, you know, wish I felt like I was always a little bit more intelligent, but I felt like the stupidest thing was that I entered the drug trade. And you know, I spent.
See, that was arrogance and humility all at the same time, right? Boy got that shit mastered.
I felt like I was always a little bit more intelligent, but I felt like the stupidest thing was that I entered the drug trade. And you know, I spent, you know, 12 years, my brother and I, and basically we're placed in a WITSEC for prisons, which is still prison, just a little bit more. They add different security measures to keep you, you know, kind of safe, you know, as possible.
So how now you're 42 years old, and you're kind of rebuilding a life outside of this world. I mean, how does that feel like? You know, what's it like trying to do that? How do you feel, you know, right now inside trying to do this, talking to the police, talking to the people who used to go after you? You know, what's it like trying to do that? And what do you see now in the world about where this is going with this trafficking and stuff?
So for the most part, having that time in prison, like my family has suffered a lot, some of through our own choices, you know, that we have to be responsible for. And I feel like I have this like feeling or this need to do something with, you know, all my knowledge and all my expertise. I feel like there's something missing, and I believe in you know, second chances and redemption. You know, I'm Christian. I believe that I was forgiven for my sins, and now what do I do with that? You know, and the Bible always says like you share your suffering, you share your testimony, and I shared it already in a way, right, in courts, but I think this time it was a little bit different. It's like, you know, to me means to me, for my children, for what's left of my legacy, because I'm always talking about how these drug traffickers are always chasing legacy. I think I kind of took that, and I'm like, you know what? I want to make sure that by the time I leave here, that my legacy is something positive, that I was able to, you know, leave a good impression for my children and for all those people who have suffered from drug trafficking, you know, that there is a way where we can actually make a difference and make some change for good.